So this is Caiaphas' house. The best history and tradition that we have tells us that this is the place where Jesus was tried by Caiaphas. This is the very place, maybe the very spot where Peter denied Jesus. When Jesus first calls Peter, he's a fisherman on the Sea of Galilee. And he's fished all night and hasn't caught anything. Jesus actually asked him, "What have you caught?" And Peter says, "Nothing." And then Jesus tells him, "Throw your nets over on the other side." And Peter, the commercial fisherman, is taking advice from a rabbi, carpenter, who doesn't know anything about fishing. But he does it. And he catches 3,000 fish. And then Jesus says, "Come follow me." And Peter decides to take him up on it. And for the next 3 years, Peter is going to have a very difficult life. He gets rebuked more than any other disciple. He makes mistakes more than any other disciple. He seems so fickle. But Peter is the one who is the most honest about his life later. He tells in Mark, who writes the first gospel, he gets it from Peter making all these mistakes. I think we need to pause. But the worst sin Peter ever committed happened right here. It was when Peter denied Jesus 3 times. And the story goes, Mark tells us, and Mark got it from Peter. The story goes that Jesus told Peter, "You're going to deny me." And Peter, not wanting to go down without a fight, initially didn't. He drew his sword on Rome. And you don't draw your sword on Rome unless you're willing to die. But ultimately, Peter does exactly what Jesus said. He denies that he even knows Jesus when it's going to cost him his life. And Jesus, as he's being led away to death, looks at Peter. I want to ask you another question. What's that face look like? Is Jesus disappointed? Is that face angry? The reason I think that's such an important question is because I think what we picture when we picture this story tells much about what we think of when we think of God. Remember, for Jesus to look at Peter was an act of grace. Peter's denying he knows Jesus for a reason. He's going to get killed if they think that he's on board with Jesus. And so what wouldn't have been grace is for Jesus to look at Peter and say, "Hey, Peter, what's going on? Don't worry, all is forgiven." No, I don't think Jesus is looking at Peter to give him a guilt trip. I don't think he's angry. He knew this was coming. I don't think he's disappointed. He told Peter this was going to happen. I think that look is a look of great hope. I think he's reminding Peter, in your darkest moments, I haven't given up on you. In fact, I can use you still, Peter. And maybe that's why the Gospel of Mark ends with the resurrection happening. And the disciples, the first edition of Mark basically ends with the disciples running away from an empty tomb. They're afraid. The angel showed up and said, "Go tell the disciples and Peter that he is risen." Not just go tell the disciples, but they specifically name Peter, and you already know why. It's because Peter, even though he'd spent 3 years with Jesus, even though he had seen him welcome and embrace and forgive people who were prostitutes and tax collectors, he had heard the stories of the prodigal. Even though all of that, Peter had this lie inside of him that so many of us have, that that's how God treats other people. But that's not how God treats me and my sin. And so the angel says, "Go tell the disciples and Peter." And now, in Acts 2, at the birth of the church, Peter is the one who gets tapped on the shoulder. He preaches a sermon from the book of Joel about restoration, which just happens to be something that Peter knows quite a bit about now. And 3,000 people are added to the Christian faith. Do you see what's happening here? The Gospel of Luke, Jesus calls Peter and thousands of fish are caught. But this time, it's not fish in the net. This is what God's dream for Peter always had been. And what's so great about this story is that God doesn't just overlook Peter's mistake. His mistake is the very thing God has used the most. It seems to me like other religions would want to sweep one of their greatest leaders' mistakes under the rug. We built a church on it. Literally, I'm in a church where history tells us this is probably where Peter denied Jesus at. We built a church on this. And that's the whole point of Pentecost. Peter doesn't just have a message. Peter is the message. He doesn't just have a message about forgiveness. The way God forgave and restored him is the message. It is a glimpse into the gospel because it's a glimpse into how God views each one of us. All is forgiven. God hasn't given up on you. Go tell the disciples and Peter.